So we are talking about how
Sorry.
to learn feel as a writer and as a human being in general, right? And Catherine McCrum, who's a Feldenkrais practitioner from England, is going to explain a little bit how to do that.
Yes, so just continue where you left off, Catherine.
Yeah, so, Shana was saying that some of the things that I've talked about in the straightness group, which are really principles of moving well and functioning well, had been quite a surprise to you. I think you'd worked it out for yourself, but no one had explained it. And, we move as well as our apprenticeship. So, if you're a child and you develop and you're relatively able to get on with doing things without too much interference, then you probably move reasonably well. But at a certain point, you probably stop learning about movement. You probably stop having that kind of curiosity to develop how you move. You go to school, you sit on uncomfortable chairs, which put you in an awkward posture. Maybe you copy your parents and how they move. You copy your peers and how they move. And we end up with these sort of layers of awkwardness, if you like, which takes away in some ways or makes it difficult for us to sense our innate capacity for effortless movement. And we all have that within our joints and bones and skeleton. We have this incredible blueprint for movement. And in some ways we have to strip away the layers that have made it more difficult for us in our adult life so that we can rediscover that innate capacity for ease and grace. And that's what I'd like to do a little bit of, because I think it's that capacity for effortless movement which is part of having this rider feel, this sense of what is the minimum amount of effort that you need for the maximum efficiency or the maximum impact.
Yeah, very good. It's very interesting. I was just thinking as you're talking, that from the writer's perspective, when writers talk about feel, they very often mean feeling the horse, what the horse is doing, what the horse needs, right? But there are different aspects to feel, of course. There's the aspect of the seat, where am I on the horse? Where should I be? Like, am I straight? Am I crooked? Am I leaning left, right, forward, backward, that kind of thing, right? And of course, ultimately you can only feel the horse well if you are balanced and you're able to relax, so they're intertwined, yes. Right?
Absolutely. And I think that brings up a very good point, is that if you are very busy keeping yourself in balance because you're trying to overcome your movement patterns or your habitual movement patterns that aren't very helpful, that makes it pretty hard to feel your horse in a sensitive and accurate way. So in some ways, we need to be able to reduce the effort in ourselves so that we can balance better, so that we have a better center and a clearer sense of upright. And from that place, it becomes a lot easier to feel what's going on underneath you on the surface that you're touching, which is this incredible moving and unpredictable surface, which is our horses.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, this idea of doing less, right? So that has a lot to do with balance, in a sense. If you can be balanced so that your pelvis and spine are stacked, on top of each other, and maybe your core muscles take care of that balance, then you can relax your arms and legs, and then arms and legs become available for communication and feeling, right? Whereas if you're a little off balance, then you have to hang on literally with your hands and legs.
Yeah, you're literally stopping yourself from falling over.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And in that moment, you can't make the small distinctions in the quality of how you're moving that will allow you to move in the way that you might wish to be effective.
Right. Yeah. And then muscles work against each other, etc. And then hardness, stiffness creeps in, right? And then stiff muscles don't feel anything anymore. And then of course, if we are unbalanced, we get in the horse's way, so then the horses can't really be balanced if we are unbalanced, right? So it becomes this negative feedback loop.
Yeah, exactly. And it's in some ways, it's about the learning part of it is to learn to have a quality of attention, a quality of how you pay attention to the internal sensory feedback, which is kind of like a continuous loop. You feel something, you make an assessment, you adjust, you feel something else, you make an assessment, you adjust. So this sort of constant shifting and looping of how you're attending to the sensory feedback and how you're acting on that. And in order to do that, you need to have a very particular quality of attention and listening to yourself.
Right.
Which then requires that you need to quieten down your thoughts. Your breath needs to be free and easy. Your head and eyes need to be free to move. You need to feel the support of the surface you are in contact with. There's many aspects to it which make this more available to us.
Yeah, it needs a certain quiet concentration, doesn't it? And in dressage, it's some dressage riders tend to be overly busy, or some trainers tend to make their students overly busy. Push, more inside leg, right? More outside rein. So people are always doing something, it's like this actionism, where they're always busy, so to speak. And then, of course, for all the busyness, then there's no time to sit and listen and pay attention and watch.
Well, yes, and I think as much as anything else, in that when we do something and we are something like riding, which requires a very high quality of movement and awareness, if you're constantly busy and you're not giving yourself any pauses, you're not really giving yourself any opportunity to process any new learning that is taking place. And also, I don't think you're giving your horse much opportunity to process either. And I believe that horses need time to integrate and process their learning too.
Absolutely.
So sort of building in the pauses and the rests is such an important part of this type of learning that we're talking about today. It's organic learning.
That's very, very true. It's very useful in riding when you take breaks, like after you've done something, an exercise or whatever, and when you feel like, okay, I've ridden the exercise a couple of times, I feel like I've reached a certain point, and then it's good to take a break so that the horse can think about what just happened, and we can think about it as well, right? And we can think about, so how did that go? So did it make the horse better? Did it make the horse worse? What was good about it? What was bad about it? What would I like to change? And so both horse and rider get a chance to think, and then often, when you're not particularly happy maybe with one ride, and you're done with it, and you feel like, I didn't really accomplish much today. But then the following day, you ride your horse, maybe you address some of the same issues, and all of a sudden it's a lot better because the horse had time to think about it. And we probably had time to think about it overnight too, and process that, whatever happened the day before.
Yes, and I think that's another important aspect of riding, and I guess it's a really unique situation, but we really are two nervous systems dancing together with our horses.
Exactly.
And so it needs to be a two-way conversation.
Right.
And that requires that, you put your business, your ambition, all those things a bit to one side.
Yep. Very true.
And you can pay attention to how what you're saying is received, and what your horse is saying is received by you. So you have this sense of the conversation between you, rather than you just talking at the horse. Right,
exactly. Yeah, it's often very unidirectional, the way it's traditionally taught, right? So that, one person, the rider gives the orders and the horse has to do something. But what is usually not taught is that people try to feel, as they're applying the aid, trying to feel how far does that impulse of the aid go into the horse's body, or how does he feel about it? What does he think? What's his inner attitude towards the aid? Does he get angry? Does he get scared? Is he open? Is he closed off? That sort of thing. Or does the aid get stuck somewhere? Is there a muscle blockage? Is there a hypermobile area where it just sort of exits the body? That sort of thing. And you can do that as you're sending that impulse of the aid into the horse. You can feel, all these things if you pay attention to them.
Yes.
But it's something that's not typically taught, unfortunately. Yeah. And the really good writers probably do a lot of these things intuitively or automatically without thinking about it. It's just natural, right? But the rest, of the writing population needs to have these things explained a little bit. The really good writers probably do a lot.
It happened again.
Shana's speaker turned on. So
sorry.
But
and I think that intuition actually is often a result of a lot of experience.
That's very true. That's very true.
And maybe we are all intuitive in the areas that we have a lot of experience and expertise.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think intuition comes through time.
Right. Right. And another aspect of the subject of feel is that what people think they're doing and what they're actually doing are very often different things, at least. They think they sit straight, in reality they lean forward maybe, right? Or they think their spine is straight, but it's actually rounded or arched or something.
Proprioception.
Yeah, proprioception, exactly. And then I just remembered again how, in other conversations we've had, how you always say that if you correct like a superficial misalignment, then you often layer on, an effort on top of a bad effort, right?
Yeah.
Another bad effort on top of another bad effort, or one mistake on top of another, instead of trying to find the root of the problem and addressing it there. I think that would be a really interesting thing for you to go into and explain to those who are not familiar with Feldenkrais. That concept.
Yes, in that the habitual movement patterns, the ways that we move that make us identifiable. If my husband's walking down the street, I can tell him a mile off. Yeah, and that is part of his ways of moving, which are habitual to him, and all of our habitual movement patterns involve a bit of excess effort in parts of ourselves. So if you then try to correct those habitual muscular efforts with more effort, you end up with a bad situation where you've got effort upon effort and it's not sustainable. Right. Whereas if you work with your sensory perception to improve your ability to sense where you are working more than you need to, then you're often actually letting go and releasing rather than employing force and more effort. And that's part of what I would like to do in the short sort of lesson that I prepared today, is to give you that feeling of how improving your sensory map, if you like, so your ability to feel yourself accurately in space, to sense how you're moving clearly, to have an internal sense of yourself, and how the different parts of you are connected through your whole self, and how that can actually change the way that you move. So it's really, the more that you're able to notice how you're doing something, just in the noticing, something changes.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Yeah. And it enables you to follow the superficial symptom back to the root cause. It's just like with the horses too, So then maybe you can explore, well, why am I always sitting more on my left seat bone than my right seat bone? And instead of just trying to sit more on the right, maybe there's a better way, more efficient way, because that just making an effort to sit more on the other seat bone could, again, create more muscular contraction like you were talking about. Whereas if you come at it from the other end and just notice what you're doing, how you're doing, where you are in space, maybe you can figure out why is that I'm always over here, instead of over there or in the middle.
Well, I think unless you know how you've got over there, you don't really have a hope in hell of getting away from there into something else.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, these typical seat mistakes that you see, like people always tipping forward, right? That's a very common one, especially the people who started as hunter jumpers, that being in a 2-point seat is so ingrained that it's almost impossible for them to sit upright, right? And to retrain that takes a long time. And I think with your Feldenkrais methodology, you can probably speed that process up, because you become aware sooner, and maybe also figure out why they're sitting that way.
Right. Instead of fumbling their way to awareness, they actually discover awareness sooner. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if they could sit up on command, I'm sure they would.
Yeah, exactly.
So essentially, you need to understand the feeling of being forward. What is the sensation of being forward? What is the sensation of being back? And what is the sensation of being somewhere in between that, where you can equally easily move forward or back,
right,
or side, or rotate.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly.
That is the center.
Right, exactly. And I always think of the proprioception as a measuring instrument that's not properly calibrated, because wherever you spend most of your time, that becomes defined as center and
as
neutral
normal, as
by your body,
normal,
right?
This is it.
No matter how crooked it is. And then when somebody else comes and tells you, no, you have to lean 45 degrees back so that you're vertical, right? Then you think you fall off the horse backwards. Or if you're always off to one side and somebody makes you sit straight, you get the feeling I'm going to fall off on the other side of the horse any second now, right? And you feel and see the same thing in horses. If horses are very crooked and you try to make them straight, some of them think that you're trying to kill them, because they have that same feeling that I'm going to fall over. I can't do that, right? If I move my weight over on the other side, I'm going to fall down, right? So there's resistance then against that, because it's hard to explain to the horse, no, you were crooked and you will be straight when you go over there. So.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that if the only time you make any attempt to find your length and your center is when you're riding, you don't give yourself much of an opportunity. It's something in some ways that if you bring it into your whole life,
good point,
then you've got a pretty good chance of being able to take it into your riding. But I think if it's, as I say, the only time you do it is on your horse for 45 minutes, probably less. And that's a pretty tall order.
That's very true. That's very true. Yeah, these habits, they go through all areas of life.
All areas of life.
Absolutely.
And this is how you can use your time off the horse to help your time on the horse.
Yeah, and I think that, in my sporting life, so to speak, most of my biggest revelations have been when I haven't been skiing or when I haven't been on my horse or doing whatever my sport is. I feel something which is so habitually ingrained that it's very unconscious, and I'll feel it maybe even in something as simple as reaching underneath the sofa to pick up something which has gone underneath it, and I suddenly feel that's what I do. That's what I do, and I feel it really clearly in my whole self. And in that moment of that, really bringing that unconscious pattern into awareness, I have the choice to inhibit it and do something else. But until I notice it, I don't have the chance to inhibit it. So you've got to make friends with your habits.
Yeah, exactly. You can only fix what you notice, right? Yes. If you're not aware of what you're doing, then there's no way to change it, right? And another challenge that's I don't know if that happens in other sports as well, but in riding, you're essentially always conditioned to try to be perfect and go from where you are, from whatever crooked, leaning, stiff to straight, upright, perfect. But it seems like to me that's almost impossible to do. If you can't go from leaning right to leaning left, and from there to the middle, or from leaning forward to leaning back, because I find it very difficult to experience where the objective center is if I can't go left and right of the center, or in front and behind the center. And in riding instruction, it's often forbidden, right? No, don't do that. You screw up the horse, right? Sit straight. And
it's funny actually, because on the subject of objective center or objective middle, many Feldenkrais lessons ask you to play, if you like, either side of your subjective middle, because you're looking for an ease of sensation and smoothness and moving. And that will often be a little bit into your habit, back to your subjective middle, a little bit away from your habit, but it'll very rarely be I'm moving equally easily to the left as I am to the right in the true objective sense, as if someone was watching you. But in the explorations of a little bit towards your pattern, return, a little bit away from your pattern, often you come more into your objective middle by the end of the session, having never tried to get there. And this is the extraordinary thing about our nervous system, is that I think that our nervous system recognizes when something feels more optimal and better. And in that moment, something changes, and it's far more complex than I can explain. But I know it from many, many experiences, both with my own, working with myself, and also with the people that I work with.
Yeah, it's very true. There's an economy of motion, I guess. If you're balanced, then you need a minimum amount of muscle work or muscle engagement, to move, to stay upright, not fall over, and so on. And I guess once you approach that point of balance, you feel it, and it's the same with the horses. The horses feel that too. If you help them balance themselves, they feel a greater sense of well-being, I guess, and also security. Like with the horses, you can see it that when they're crooked and stiff and unbalanced, they're tense, they're nervous, they're mentally often not at all relaxed. And the more you help them physically become balanced, the more they feel secure on their feet. They know where the feet are. They get the sense that they couldn't fall over so easily, and then everything relaxes from there. And there's also a noticeable release in the sense that now muscles that were bracing to prevent falling down, they can release now. And now the horse is only using the muscles that are really absolutely necessary, and everything else can relax, right?
Yeah, and I think also your habitual movement patterns. Say, for instance, it's easier for you to turn or spiral yourself to the left, which is the case for me. When I turn to the left, I get the opportunity to feel a really well-coordinated action. And in that sensing, my really well-coordinated action of turning to the left, which is my habit, which makes it difficult for me to turn to the right, but it gives me the opportunity to experience the smoothness, the ease, the effortlessness, which I would like to take into other actions. So your habits are incredibly useful. They really can be your friend.
If you know how to utilize them.
If you know how to utilize it, yeah. But people want to get rid of them.
Right. You can't get rid of all habits.
But it's just an action. It's it's not something to be rid of. It's an action. But we just want to increase your repertoire of movements and actions, so you have more choice, more freedom.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. That's a good way of putting it. You have more choice, more freedom of movement. So you can sit wherever you need to sit, right? Or you can, put your legs, your hands, your upper body, wherever it needs to be to help the horse at that moment, right? And the other thing, other aspect that you find in dressage is that people get very fixated on these absolutes, like you have to be absolutely vertical, objectively vertical. But, in reality, the horse is a little crooked. And we are a little crooked. And in order for us two to be balanced together in a dynamic balance, maybe I need to be a little off center, actually, because if I'm really vertical and straight, maybe I'm actually contributing to the horse's crookedness. Maybe I can't fix the horse's crookedness if I'm objectively straight. Right. So you have to find
the way the horse needs.
Yeah, where am I balanced with the horse, right? So
there isn't a person alive who's totally symmetrical in their use.
Exactly.
Well, I haven't met them. If someone is, then I'd love to meet you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same with the horse. They're all different. That's why, it's important, I think, when you're riding to feel a little bit, where does the horse need me to be, right? So that when I ride this circle line or this straight line, the horse feels soft and round and balanced, and it feels like it flows, like the energy flows through the body, and as soon as you're not balanced and not straight anymore, the energy doesn't flow as well. And then, the feeling of the round flowing motion goes away. Then there are catches, corners, and, rough edges, and it's not smooth anymore. And then the more you approach balance, the softer and rounder it feels, the more you feel like I'm in this groove, I'm in this flow, And sometimes it happened to me that in order to get into this flow feeling or this groove, the seat felt really funny. Like I feel like twisted like a pretzel up there. But then, of course, if you see yourself in the mirror, it looks okay. It looks normal. It's just my own feeling at that moment is odd, because I have to compensate for the horse's crookedness, for my own crookedness. So that puts me in a position that is unusual for me, probably, right? So it feels weird.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
then if you spend some time in that position, it doesn't feel weird anymore. Because, I probably adjust, the horse adjusts, maybe together we're a little straighter. So now it doesn't feel odd anymore.
Just a message there from Ritter saying that the microphone, since the microphone was moved, the sound has gone a bit funny.
Oh, okay.
Can you move it to the
I can move it back. Okay.
Yeah, and what you said about, twisting yourself into a pretzel, well, in some ways that is just a movement pattern. And maybe it was a new movement pattern for you or an unusual one, but then it becomes, that's how learning happens, isn't it? First time we brush our teeth, your mum has to hold your hand, but then new learning is conscious, and then it becomes unconscious. It kind of sinks down.
Exactly. Yeah.
So these things become familiar, and you have a larger repertoire of ways to move. And more ways of helping your horse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's also for the riders, it's a startling discovery that sometimes they have to do something that feels really weird and odd because they've never done that. But weird or odd is not necessarily bad. It's not necessarily incorrect, right? Yeah, exactly. It's different. And in lessons, I always ask students, so how does it feel now? Like, how is the horse feeling? How's your seat? Whatever. Just to compare before and after. Is it better? Is it worse? Is it the same? And sometimes they say, oh, this is so weird. And then I ask, well, good weird or bad weird?
And they say, I'm not sure.
Exactly. Because, they need time to experience, be in that state, right? And experience that. And, then you'll, over time it will show whether now they have more movement options and they can do more with their horse, if it feels overall rounder, softer, and if they have the feeling, okay, now I can do better turns, I can do better transitions, I can do a few movements now that weren't possible before, right? So then it must have been a change for the better. Whereas if you feel like, it feels weird and now I feel like I have fewer movement options, then maybe it wasn't a good change, right?
Well, and actually on the subject of change, if you change any one part of yourself, that affects the whole.
Right.
So you change something in your hand and that will change your entire posture all the way down to your feet. So in some ways, the more clearly you feel how the different movements in the parts of yourself are part of a whole, the more chance you have to be able to move in the way that you want, with the quality that you would like.
It's very true. Everything is always connected, right? Yeah. If you change one body part, everything else is affected. Same with the horse, right? If you move the horse's shoulder an inch to the left or the right, it affects everything, right? Balance, straightness, suppleness, throughness, relaxation, impulsion, collection, everything, right? And for us, it's
I find often with people, and certainly, I would say the same about myself, is that we have these sensory black holes, if you like, where we have absolutely no clue what's going on. Not only we have no clue, it's almost like they don't exist. One example is many people don't really feel what's going on in the spine between their shoulder blades. I think because there are so many complex muscles which are to do with how you use your arms and hands that people kind of get in a muddle. They fix their shoulders too much, and then that part of your spine, which is a really important part of suppleness, because of it side bends, rotates, arches and rounds, gets lost. And then the movement is no longer evenly distributed through you. Then you have to work somewhere else to compensate for that.
Very true.
So I think part of what Feldenkrais lessons do, because we have over 1,000 of them, is that they bring every part of you into your sensory awareness and also into your moving map, if you like, of yourself.
Yeah, and you see it like when you're teaching riding lessons, you see that some people have no awareness of one side of their body, going left maybe. They always put their left hand on their left side. It's always too far down, too far back. They're always pulling on it, right? And they're not aware because it's such a habit, right? Or one hand may always go up and forward, right? So it's always somewhere where it's not supposed to be, right? And you have to constantly remind them because it's such a habit that they don't realize they're doing it. And
Yeah, and actually in that, often if someone is constantly lifting their hand and then they bring it down and then they lift it again, it's because of something that's going on in their ribs and their spine, because say you're a little bit short in your right side and your left side is more open, inevitably that's going to lift your shoulder, that's going to lift your arm. And so unless you understand how this is situated in the whole of you, you bring it down, but everything else is kind of going, no, go up again.
Exactly. It always goes back there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, very true. And in horses, you find the same thing, that sometimes they have no awareness of hind legs, for example, that they have hind legs at all, or they don't feel one hind leg. They may feel one hind leg sort of, but the other one is completely, like it belongs to somebody else. So, and then you have to expand that awareness to include all four legs. Yeah. All right. So do you want to do your lesson first that you've prepared?
We could do that, couldn't we?
Or do you want to look at some of the questions, comments?
Yeah, it's you, Catherine. What would you prefer to do first?
We could maybe take a couple of questions and then do the lesson. How about that? It's a sort of middle road.
Okay. So let's see here. I don't think we have any questions on Zoom.
On Facebook, there was.
Yeah. No questions.
I'm just scanning here, quickly looking through.
If there aren't, we could go straight in.
So
okay.
Gloria Cepeda was saying, I have better feel only bareback, but not in the saddle, which is also an interesting, another layer of complexity to feel. Yeah. Without saddle, you're closer to the horse, of course. It has other disadvantages, but but that's also then maybe a goal to learn to feel through the saddle.
Yeah.
And then Brenda Foster had said, I think I give effort upon effort in trying to get my toes pointing forward and not turning out, hoping I can notice how to change and find the root cause. Exactly. That's a good example, actually, because, writing teachers often say, point your toes forward, right? And then the student maybe makes an effort to turn their feet. But, as long as the femur is rotated out, there's nothing you can do with your feet that will fix the situation.
And if you have really flexible ankles, your leg can still be turned out, essentially, from the hip joint, but your toe can be turned in.
But it's
Brenda, you're going to enjoy, if you're around on Thursday for the dynamic seat lesson, you're going to enjoy that lesson. I think it might help you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's a very typical example. And the thing is, of course, then if you try to force it, right? If the problem is maybe in the femur joint, but you try to fix it by turning your feet in, you can really hurt yourself, right?
You can.
Or if you try to twist the knee,
you're actually creating more problems rather than fixing problems.
Yeah. Exactly. So then Sharon France had said, I've struggled for 10 years with my coordination and balance, despite having worked with sports masseurs, physios, osteopaths, chiropractors, Feldenkrais, Pilates, and Alexander practitioners. And there doesn't seem to be any one answer.
That I agree with. There isn't any one answer. Because the answer lies with yourself ultimately, and how you can take what you get from the people you're working with into your own life and your own way of moving. So it is a process of developing your own awareness. Unfortunately, we can't fix you. We can only give you some ways of experimenting, exploring, that hopefully you can start to find a way of moving and coordinating your actions, which is more pleasing to you, more pleasurable.
Right. And Anne-Marie Spear had said, I like Catherine have these revelations about how I move in executing.
So we had one question from Thrun Solmi, asked, could these black holes also apply to the horses, which you basically essentially...
yeah, I think so, from what Thomas has said.
Yes.
I mean, of course, horses are only people too, right? So essentially everything applies to horse and rider. With whatever issues you find in the riders, you find in the horses.
Yes, and like he mentioned, that sometimes the horses have no idea that they have other legs. They just know about the one shoulder that they like to put all their weight on, and maybe maybe one of the hind legs, maybe not. Sometimes they're only aware they have one leg.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's very interesting to see that, and the problems it causes.
So we do a lot with the horses to improve their body awareness. And that's why we hooked up with Catherine, because she does a lot with people to help the people learn their body awareness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's so much overlap, you know.
Yes. I mean, which is why, and I think also, you know, it's not only in the fact that you're working with, you know, the horse's awareness, and I'm working with people's awareness, but the principles of how you teach are very similar to Feldenkrais. This sense of exploration, organic learning, experimenting, noticing what works better, what doesn't feel so good, constantly looping back to noticing, observing, sensing, feeling. It's really Feldenkrais. It's Feldenkrais for dressage riders.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, and then for me, that came really out of desperation. You know, when I didn't have a teacher, and I eventually didn't know what else to do. Like, I didn't know what the right thing to do was, like in the seat, how to sit, how to aid. And so I thought, well, I have nothing left to lose, so I'm just going to try, right? And I'm going to compare, right? So because what I've been doing wasn't working, right? So now I'll do the opposite and see if that's any better, right?
And what do you observe? What do you notice?
Yeah, exactly.
You know? This informs your education about your seat, not your horse.
Exactly. And then I was thinking, well, what options do I have? But, you know, with my body, I can go forward and backward and left and right and, you know, move in 3 dimensions. So I can always set up these binary oppositions and explore that. Well, is it better if I tilt forward, or is it better if I tilt back? Or if I go from one to the other, is there a point where the horse feels the best? And I always use the horse as my indicator, right?
Yes.
Because it doesn't really matter if I feel good. It matters if the horse feels good, right? So, and I just have to then cope with with it. If the horse feels good in a position where I feel weird, then well, too bad. Then I just have to get used to that, right? But if the horse feels round and soft and relaxed and balanced, then the seat can't be very wrong, right? It's got to be pretty close to where it needs to be, right? And then with these binary, you know, oppositions, comparisons, then I discovered a lot, you know. And of course, you know, you have all these thousands of exercises in Feldenkrais. That's even more efficient.
Well, I think what you're describing there is that in order to make changes, you need to be able to make these really subtle distinctions between different, you know, in your case, you were the forward and back and right and left.
Right.
But that can be in every aspect of functioning and movement.
Right.
You know, and that comes back to the quality of your attention, the quality of your listening, your ability to sense yourself, to feel the joints, the movement in the joints. I see there are several questions about being more flexible in your hips and being more upright. They're big questions. I think one thing that is maybe universal to those questions is that unless you have a clear sense of support from the ground or from the surface you're on, so you really know how to take support, it'll be very difficult to be upright, and B, it'll be very difficult to be supple in your hips. Your hip joints, I would say. I think that's what you're asking. It's your hip joints which I think in riding are so important to feel accurately. So you need to have a clear sense of support.
Yes.
And we will be looking at that on Thursday.
Yes.
Very good. Well,
let's
go
move into the list.
Shall we dive
in? Great.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so this lesson is called The Surgeon's Hands. And Moshe Feldenkrais taught it in a hospital where he went to have an operation. He had cataracts in his eyes, and he needed to have an operation to remove them. And the head surgeon who did the operation had the most marvelous touch. He was very sensitive, he was very skilled, he was very refined. But the next day, the junior doctor came and was very rough with his hands and had terrible touch and not a very good feel. And so Moshe complained about this, and the head surgeon said, I don't have time to teach my residents how to touch and feel and have a refined use of themselves. So could you develop some lessons and teach them? And this is where this lesson arises from. So it's the surgeon's hands. And it's a short version because the original lesson is about 50 minutes. So it's just a short snippet of that. But I hope it'll give you a little bit of a feeling of some of the concepts that we've been talking about tonight. So, yeah. So you can be on a chair if you're sitting in a chair. It's better if the chair has got a firm seat. But, you know, as good as you can get. But whatever chair you're on, yeah, you could sit on that. I love that. It's on that book.
Good for something, at least.
Wherever you're sitting, find a way so that you're more or less at the front edge of that chair.
Okay, I'll sit on.
So your back is away from the back.
Okay.
Shana gets the biomechanical principles and therefore will probably have a better lesson.
Yes.
And just let your, have your feet and knees a comfortable distance apart. And have the soles of your feet flat on the floor. And rest your legs or rest your hands on your thighs, somewhere that feels comfortable. And in this place, very slowly and just a small amount, turn your head and eyes a little bit to the right and back to your center and a little bit to the left. And can you turn your head and eyes as if you were trying to find out which is your easier direction? Which way do you feel better coordinated to turn? Which direction is smoother? Maybe you can go further in one direction than the other. And then come back to facing your middle. And maybe you could do this bit with your eyes closed so that you can tune into your internal sensations a little bit more clearly. And with your head and eyes now staying more or less in the middle, start to sense the way that your hands shape to the surface they're resting on. So do you have a sense of your right hand, the palm, the 5 fingers, the thumb is going to be fingers? How much space is there between the fingers of your right hand? Are some fingers a little bit more bent and some straight? And what about your left hand? How does that compare to how your right hand is resting? Which hand seems to shape and contour its thigh more easily? Maybe there's a little bit less tension in one hand than the other. And now, a couple of times, lift your whole right arm a little bit up into the air so that your arm is coming up a little bit towards shoulder height. And then return your hand back onto your thigh. And as you do that, let your hand almost dangle off your wrist. So your hand is hanging softly off the end of your wrist. And sense as you return your hand to your thigh, how does your hand contour and drape onto your leg? Try this a few times with your left arm. So you slowly lift your left arm, you let your hand dangle off the end of your wrist, and then you return your hand onto your thigh and feel how your left hand takes the shape of your left leg. And maybe notice, does one hand seem to drape and contour its leg a little bit more fully as you lift and lower that arm? And then pause and rest, and you can either rest with your eyes closed or you can open your eyes. And now take your arms in front of you. So your arms will be about shoulder width apart, and the elbows can be a little bit bent, but you don't want the hands and arms all the way by your side. So a place where you can easily hold the weight of your arms without too much strain. And have your hands not straight and rigid, but just soft. And close your eyes again. And with your eyes closed, bring the pads of your fingers of your right hand and the pads of your fingers of your left hand to touch in the middle. And feel, as your hands and your fingers land, how accurately do they meet each other. So your eyes need to be closed, and then you take them away again, and you open your arms out as wide as you want. And then slowly bring the pads of your fingers to touch in the middle. And feel, how accurately do your hands land. And do the pads of your 5 fingers touch all at the same time? Or do some fingers seem to arrive before the others? As you do this movement, notice, do you hold your breath? Do you have any efforts in your throat, your tongue, and your jaw? In your eyes? And then leave that and let your hands rest once again on your thighs. And now just bring your left arm up in front of you. And so your left arm is going to be still. And again, finding a comfortable place, the elbow can be a bit bent. The palm faces inwards. And again, close your eyes. Take your right hand out wide. And keeping your left arm still, bring your right fingers, the pads of your right fingers, to touch the pads of your left fingers. And see how accurately do your fingers land on your left hand. Do that several times. So you take your right hand away from you. Yes, if you need to move back or adjust where you are so you've got some space.
Back.
You take your hand away and then you bring it, and be sure that your left hand really stays still. Can you shape your 2 hands so that all 5 fingers land at the same time? It's interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost like this is your sensory map in motion. This is how accurately you feel where you are in space. Mm-hmm. And in this seemingly simple movement, we sense the difficulty of really knowing where we are, in that it's very difficult to touch all 5 fingers and land them at the same time on your other hand. Let your hands rest. And bring your hands back onto your thighs. And sense now how your hands and your fingers shape to the shape of your thigh, the surface they're resting on. Do you notice any change? Which hand feels softer? Which arm seems heavier? Maybe one arm feels a little bit heavier, one a bit lighter. And does that relate to how you sense your shoulders? Is one shoulder more forward, one shoulder more back? Perhaps one shoulder is higher and the other lower. Can you feel and sense the length of the right side of your neck compared to the left side of your neck? Now this time, with your eyes closed, bring your 2 hands in front of you. Have your left arm more or less in front of your left shoulder, but a little bit lower, with the elbow softly bent. And bring your right hand to touch the left hand. So the fingers are soft, the pads of the fingers are touching each other. And you know, it's the pads of the fingers which are most neurologically rich and sensitive. So start to circle just the pads of your right fingers around the pads of your left fingers. So you'll be making these super small circles. And again, it's a seemingly simple movement, but can you refine the quality with which you're doing this so that you have a continuous pressure of each finger as it makes its circle? And you could maybe start by tracking one finger and see if that circle could be smooth with a continuous even pressure. And then the next finger. You can rest whenever you need to. Moving through all 5 fingers. The cat's doing the lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And then let your hands rest. And again, sense, how are your hands resting now? How do you feel the 5 fingers of your right hand? What differences do you feel between the sensation in your right hand as it touches your right thigh and your left hand? Is one hand easier to feel than the other? One more time with your eyes closed. Bring your 2 hands in front of you so your arms are a little bit lower than shoulder height, and touch your fingers together with your eyes closed. And go back to where we started, where you moved your hands away from each other and you take your arms wide and then you touch the pads of all 10 fingers at once. How is this now? How do your 2 hands find each other as compared to the start? Can you sense, as your fingers touch, can you have a sense of your breath? Can you scan the rest of yourself and listen for any areas where you could do less? The muscles of your throat, between your shoulder blades. Could you soften your eyes? And then leave that, let your hands rest. And resting your hands on your thighs, go back to the movement of turning your head a little bit to the right and turning your head to the left. And feel, how is this now? Keep your eyes closed as you turn your head. And if you think the freedom of your head and neck is intimately connected with the softness and the versatility and the adaptability of your hands. So as you turn your head, could you observe how this movement of turning travels down your whole spine towards your pelvis, and then out to your shoulder girdle and down to your arms and your hands, so that you could feel how your arms and your hands are really part of your spine and your pelvis. And then slowly come back to your center and take your time coming back to your surroundings, to your environment. And there we are, the surgeon's hands.
Fabulous.
Very interesting. Yeah. Very cool. Yeah.
Super interesting.
Yeah, we should ask the viewers if they tried it and what they felt.
I probably should have said you need some space in front of you.
Yeah, it's a little cramped, but you can still. Yeah. Well, did anybody try it?
We have some comments here. Let's see here. There's a question about before. Okay, these were questions about before. 2 people have raised their hands.
It's interesting. I think these lessons they're quite a rich sensory experience. And sometimes it can be really great to just stay in that space for a while before you go too quickly to your reasoning, your understanding.
It's true. It was very meditative.
Yeah.
It's hard to come out of that again.
I feel mesmerized.
Yeah, me too. I know.
It's
I almost didn't come back.
I know. It's wonderful to be, it's very luxurious in a way to be able to just be in your body and just
what a treat.
In your body. Yes.
Okay, let's see. So here they are.
Cat, I'm not sure. It cuts off your name. It says, how amazing to show how everything is attached and affects everything. Suzanne said, lovely lesson, thank you. And Kat says, I agree, relaxing.
Yep.
It might be Cat Punkt, I'm not sure. It doesn't say.
So Corolla Friesen says, love it. Sandra Grant says, my right hand felt stronger than the left. Monica Schillmeyer says, turning to the right was easier and my right hand found the left one much better. Is there a link?
Dominant hand, non-dominant hand, probably. And we're organized around our, dominant hand. Yeah.
Lee DeGanji says, wow, neck was much looser after this.
Oh, cool. Yes. Funnily enough, that's why I was doing this lesson for myself a couple of weeks ago, and I was feeling a bit like, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I can turn really easily to the right now. So I thought, that was a lovely experience.
You wouldn't think that a lesson about the hands would affect the neck.
Yeah,
so much.
My neck was looser too, and I felt like it was more even turning left and right. Yeah. That's interesting. Marcy Allard said, I found that unevenness changes with each exercise.
Oh.
Gabrielle Pop says, my ability to touch my fingers without missing improved.
Yes.
Yeah. That's, your spatial awareness. So important for riding.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Knowing where you are in space.
Yeah. And then Jenny Inkpen Kitzmann says, felt really good. Fingers meeting much better at the end, but gave me a spasm between my shoulder blades. That's interesting.
Yeah, you might have needed to rest somewhere in the midst and then pick up again. Holding your arms here, it really requires a clear sense of how your shoulder girdle is supported by your ribs, your spine, and your pelvis. So if you're not quite clear in your support, then the arms can get super tired. Yeah. The muscles tire.
Yeah. And then Linda Steinberg said, I had a tougher time moving to the left at first, but after the exercise, it was easier to move my head to the left.
Ah, yes.
And
yes.
Interesting. Carola Friesen also says, my neck was more balanced after. So that seems to be a pretty common observation, right? Monica Schillmeyer says, plus the right hand also was the one feeling more adapted to my leg.
Like it contoured. And one of the things I liked about this lesson, because, Thomas and other people often talk about the thighs draping the horse. Yeah. And so I like the idea of what does that mean? What is that quality in ourselves to drape? And, our hands are much more sensitive and neurologically rich than our thighs. So it's a really good opportunity to feel that quality so that you have it in your sensory memory and then you can visit it in other parts of yourself.
Yes, I noticed the same thing. My right hand draped really lovely around my thigh, and the left hand was like
the claw.
Like a claw.
Yes.
I was like, well, how can that be?
So Inka Spatafora says, I'm surprised that I was actually pretty accurate with my palms and touching them. And Nan Brünig says, just awesome.
Just awesome.
And Georgina Frame says, I'm right-handed, but found my left hand stronger and more relaxed. Interesting. And then Catherine Patricia Aronson says, my neck was much less stiff afterwards.
Yes.
Also was able to meet the pads of fingers exactly. And Anne-Marie Spears says, initially my left hand was 2 inches higher than the right, but ended being able to meet each finger spot on.
Cool.
Yeah. Sandra Grant says it was mostly my pinky finger that would miss. Interesting. Then Lisa Drayton says, that was amazing. I had restriction of turning my head to the right and more free at the end of session. It's funny that almost everybody seems to have that same experience, right? That the neck got looser. So James Purcell says, my right side was a lot harder at first, but by the end felt a lot better. Gabrielle Pop says, my hands felt softer afterwards, especially on the right. She's on the tight, but it probably means on the right. And Linda Steinberg says, interesting how softening your hands softens your neck. Yeah.
Yes.
That's also something I didn't expect to find, but it's interesting. Yeah.
And if we taught the longer lesson, you would have found that softening your right hand would soften your whole right side.
Wow.
So, you could probably have the experience of standing up and feeling more support and more a different sense through your whole right side as you stood. You may be even more balanced sometimes.
That's interesting.
And you get these really stark contrasts between the side that you've worked and the side that you've, as you said, it's like Dali-esque. You have this melting, and the claw.
That is so interesting. Yeah, so Ann Hoover says, I noticed how much my jaw and tongue were clenched while I was doing this. Interesting. Yeah. And, Georgina Frames is very inaccurate in touching fingertips. Margot Moore-Kelkin says, love it, almost felt electric between my finger pads, and I noticed that I really need to relax my shoulders more.
Yeah. Don't we all?
Yeah.
I mean, it's modern life,
It is. We're all like this. We're on our phone.
The laptops.
And a lot of people store their tension, nervousness, whatever, aggravation in their shoulders, get a headache and so on. And that, those people then tend to also tighten the shoulders when they ride and, pull the shoulders up, and then everything locks up. So it's interesting. I guess for someone like that who has that problem, that would be a great exercise to do.
I think it would be great. And I think that, part of what might happen for when you do that lesson is that without thinking about it, you will adjust how you are in space, your uprightness, and the shoulders will just find their support. Because if you're like this and then someone says you've got to get your shoulders down, that's another example of correcting something which is incorrect without really understanding what you're doing and ending up with double the tension. And you can't maintain it, and it's not something that's going to feel pleasant to you, and it's certainly not going to feel pleasant to your horse.
Right.
No. It's not going to help you ride better.
No.
Really. And that's
it's not going to help your coordination.
No. No.
It might make you look like a better position from the outside, but not the use of a fixed position.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Then Martina Meyerhofer says, my muscles along my spine started hurting. Otherwise, it felt very relaxing. So that's also something that now several people have commented on, that their shoulders started hurting, between the shoulder blades.
Yeah, it's as I said, unless you feel that clear support, all the muscles, the trapezius muscles and these muscles around the shoulders will be working hard to hold the weight of your arms up. Yes. But once you get a clearer support from your sitting bones, your legs, the surface you're sitting on, and you find that length in your spine, you'll find you can keep your arms up for longer and longer without tiring at all. That's a process. It takes time.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Actually, what you're saying there gives me the idea that, the relaxation of the neck, maybe the exercise changes the position of our head. A lot of people have the head sticking out in front, right? And that, of course, strains the muscles in the back of the neck and the shoulders. So if the exercise somehow aligns your head a little bit further back, then these muscles can relax.
It might be that we naturally start to do that when we close our eyes, because once you close your eyes, you feel like you're maybe going upwards. So you naturally start to find your balance and start to stack a little bit better. The head over the...
Yeah, and our nervous system is very busy trying to keep us in balance all the time. So once you remove some of your habitual muscular contractions, you've got a better chance of being able to find that equilibrium, if you like, that kind of place where you can move equally easily in any direction.
Yeah. So then Carolyn Duff Riddle says, I have arthritis in my hands, and I found after this my hands felt looser and more part of me.
Oh, cool.
which is interesting too. We're connected, you know.
Yeah, and I think even if you do have arthritis, you can still find a way to move as well as you can, despite some of the challenges and difficulties that you have. There's still refinements that you can make.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting that it, with arthritis, it almost has a healing quality. It sounds like, that's interesting. And then Brenda McCann says, easier to write. Amazing how light touch can be.
Yes.
That's a good discovery. That's part of the point of the exercise in a way, right? To discover how little is enough, how little is necessary.
Yes, I think when you do a session like that, which is really about, enriching your the sensory world of your fingers and your hands, go and pick something up and you'll feel a really big difference.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We overgrip so much. We have different tension in different fingers. Someone, for instance, who plays the piano will probably have a more symmetrical use of themselves. And of course, we type a lot now, so that also, I think, has changed things. When we were always writing, probably you could get very, very one-sided. But according to the things that you've done in your life, you will have a greater or lesser awareness or skill and refined use of your hands.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. In lessons, I would sometimes also touch the writer's forearm or wrist and to check, how much tension they have. And it's amazing how, some people have this clenched fist with maximum muscle contraction.
And this is just normal.
And they're not aware. Yeah, it's what they always do, right? It's like, oh my God, how can you operate like this? How can you feel anything like this? And then when you watch videos of the Spanish writing school, there's sometimes scenes where you see them holding a lunge whip or a writing whip. It's like they zoom in a little bit, and it always strikes me how soft and relaxed their hands look. It looks like they're not using any muscles, almost like they're holding the whip, just balancing it so its own weight lets it rest in their hand, and it has this absolute soft look about it.
Well, one of our teachers used to always remind us frequently in the lessons to keep our wrists relaxed. To remember to relax your wrists, remember to do this. And when you bring your attention periodically to it, you find yourself more and more releasing that tension, and then you don't need that reminder so much because it becomes part of your own circuit of thinking or of action. You check your wrist.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because of course you totally relax your wrist, you're going to do that. So it's finding just the right balance.
Exactly.
And this is again comes into
so true.
How much effort do you need for what you're doing?
Right. Exactly.
And use the bare minimum. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yes, it is.
Interesting.
I love it.
Yeah. So Gabriele Kopp says this was an excellent demonstration in body awareness.
Yeah.
Sandra Grant says I could hear my neck cracking.
Gunshots.
No head banging there, huh? Not too vigorous neck movement. And Linda Steinberg said I had more accuracy putting my hands together when I activated my core. That's an interesting observation. That sounds totally right. That makes total sense to me. That as you engage your core, you can relax your extremities more. I mean, that's my experience in writing too.
I mean, I might think that if you have a clear sense of the strength and stability of your spinal column, that is your uprightness, then I think you could refine it even more. I think using your stomach muscles, it's probably a bit of a dead end. I'm going to be a bit controversial.
On their own, because you can engage your core and still be looking forward, which, as we know, doesn't improve your ability to do this or your sense of balance or relaxation.
I mean, if you look at or think of core muscles more as providing stability, then it's not necessary to the spine. Exactly. Yeah. Then it's not just the abs or what it's probably different set of muscles for each writer depending on how we're shaped, right? One person might have to engage more abs, another more back muscles, one person higher, other person lower down in the body, so it's a different configuration. And then when you get it just right, you can relax, right?
So I think that if you have a really clear sense of your vertebral column and what length feels like, you won't have to worry about your muscles too much, because they will have organized around that length.
Right.
But until you do, it may be that you need to activate a bit more. But your muscles will activate just the right amount to keep your spine lengthened. But I think it can come the other way around.
Right.
And then you'll have an appropriate amount of effort in your muscles for your spine to be aligned. Whereas when you engage your muscles, it's a bit hit and miss.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you can approach it from opposite sides, probably. Right? Either just think of, straight spine, picture some, I don't know, tree or mast of a ship or something. But you could also think of feeling back muscles, abdominal muscles or so, and trying to engage them more, engage them less, see how it feels and so on. So and then eventually it becomes subconscious anyway, So when you feel like, okay, this feels relaxed, this feels balanced, this feels good, this feels easy, then it becomes effortless after a while. Interesting. Let me see.
Should we take a few more questions, perhaps? Or comments? See what we have from Zoom.
Marcy Allett says, I tended to shallow breathe when I tried harder.
Yes, I think that's very common, isn't it? And when you tried harder, did you get more accurate or less? Or did your movements get more refined or less when you tried harder? I think that's...
Yeah, good question.
Okay, so Charlotte Zetterberg said, it is interesting to feel all the joints of the fingers moving very, very little when you held the finger pads together and made circles with the right fingers.
Yeah.
And so Kat is Catherine Dalmet. Hi. She says, this is the first one of these that I've been a participant in. It's wild, huh? It's amazing how much of a difference it can make for your awareness. And I think it's Helen, I'm not sure, said, I had no trouble with these exercises, but it must be because I go to monthly upper cervical chiropractor adjustments. He must be doing a good job. And Mary or Marlene or something, it just says Mar, I'm not sure. And
Martina.
Martina,
I think.
Martina, yeah. Okay. Oh, good. Said, thank you. At least of this lesson, I realized that my seat bones are not equal on the chair.
Very interesting.
And Catherine says, right touching left more accurate than left touching right. And Britt says, it's really relaxing to my whole body. I had to yawn a lot. But is it possible to deblock the blockages that I felt in my neck? Are there exercises or movements to improve tight neck muscles?
Yes. Yes, there are. Many.
Yes.
Many of them. Yes.
And Joy said, thanks, Catherine. I got to go teach my Feldenkrais class now. Awesome.
Yeah.
And Martina says, I have not realized this before, that I can correct it. Good lesson. And Viv says, very interesting. Riding a center line with eyes closed is revealing and helpful in developing feel. Not a test, though. Not in a test.
Yeah.
No, if you do that in a test, it might not get you a very good score.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's an interesting one from Suzanne.
Yeah, and Suzanne said, I presented a workshop Sunday. I had one participant place her hand on my belly and another create a force trying to displace me. She was amazed that there was no tension in my belly. It's skeletal alignment and refined use of deep musculature to redirect the force, not core strength.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. But until you've had that experience, you probably won't believe us.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Because we are so addicted to the idea that we need to have a strong core abdominal muscles. Yeah, but when you feel that, you are incredibly stable, incredibly strong, and there is no tension. I'm sure there is. There's an amount of tension, but you don't increase the tension in order to resist the force. You actually do a lot of things like you actually increase your support into the floor. You increase your sense of the stability of your spinal column. And yes, it's about forces.
I wonder if that's what happens in Tai Chi. You know, I've heard stories that some, 80-year-old Tai Chi master can stand there and then like 20 young guys cannot push him over and he just roots his energy into the ground. I wonder if that's the same thing.
It's not strength. It's not core strength. No, it's a really, I think it's a really good sense of your support from your skeleton. And your alignment. Yeah.
Blowing our minds. Yeah. As always. I love it.
Yeah,
I love to shake things up in our understanding. So when you shake things up, things settle to a better place. You understand, you know more.
Absolutely, yeah. That's so interesting.
That's good.
Yeah. So Jessica Westphal says, definitely managed to get my fingers together at the end without effort. At the beginning, only thumb and first two fingers touched centered. Feeling looser, softer in my whole back at the end. I think it straightened my back. My neck was softer, turning it easier. Yeah, let's see if there's anything else.
Yeah, when you reduce the tone of your muscles in your hand, then you reduce the tone through your whole self. So
interesting.
That may be where you feel you get that little bit of extra length because you're compressing yourself so much. And that's part of the reason why contracting your core, it actually compresses and shortens you. So you actually lose that integrity.
Okay, so we had a couple more questions, but I have it going in several places. So Nicola Dolby said that was really interesting. In the last exercise, my fingers met each time. I was miles out at the beginning. Yes.
Nice change, quick change.
Nice, isn't that? How quickly you can change something.
Yes.
And Suzanne Greil said this was so amazing. At the beginning, I had more trouble moving my head to the right. And also my right hand did not lay as close to my thigh than the left. This feeling was completely gone after. Very good. And Lisa Feischl said, question about finger circle. What joint should move? Only finger or also hand or shoulder?
Yeah, no. So that's a very good question, isn't it? Yes, your whole arm will move.
Okay.
Yeah. You could do it. It would be quite difficult to do it you could probably do it just in your, no, it's really from the whole arm.
So interesting. And Throne Somi said, I breathed out when my hands went out and in when the hands were meeting. My right hand always landed a little bit under the left hand's fingertips. I have this too. I felt I did get a bit better in the meeting of the finger buds. I realized that the left side of my neck is my black hole. I suddenly realized I don't seem to have a left side of it.
You found your black hole.
I have a tendency to get stuck, not being able to turn my neck to the right. Could that cause too much focus on the right side and make me forget I have a left side?
Yes, maybe it could. Maybe it could. And in fact, actually, I think that riding in particular requires a really harmonious conversation between the right and the left sides, as well as the top and the bottom. And
right. That's why riding is actually really good therapy for those that need it. Yeah. So the same as they say crawling. Getting on.
Yeah, they're cross crawling. Yes.
This is really good. Yeah. And like you mentioned about playing piano, I was thinking so true because when you play other musical instruments, you don't use the hands equally so much. In piano, out of all of the musical instruments, you use both hands somewhat the same. Of course, they could be playing different things, but the skill level has to become the same. Whereas guitar, Thomas plays guitar, the hands are both working, doing things, but they're doing very different things.
Yes, and one hand is busy supporting.
And one shoulder, one shoulder is up, and it creates
it's not the healthiest posture.
Misalignment. That's why.
Good for the soul, though.
Yeah, it is. But that's why so many professional musicians, they have to do other things to keep their body healthy, so that they don't, end up, have to let the cat in again.
Yeah. So here, another interesting comment here. Constance Phillips says, I have nerve damage on right side following an accident. I set off the nerves. They tingled a lot when I moved the left arm towards the right arm to touch fingers.
Mm.
This happens frequently during my riding. I never figured what triggered the sensation.
Mm.
So nerve damage on the right.
Mm.
But when she moved the left arm, nerves tingled. Huh.
Ah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And then Kat M. wants to know if this is possible to do while lying down as well.
Yes, absolutely. And actually, if it's tiring to do it, it's useful to do it sitting because, of course, you know, you want to be able to feel how the arms and hands are connected to the spine and the pelvis in a more out of gravity. Mm-hmm. But yes, do it lying down because you might get a different sense of the support. Then comes from the back of the shoulders onto the floor, and you might get a different sense of. You'd learn something else and something new. And yeah, you know, many of these times we teach themes of lessons in all sorts of different positions and with a lot of variety because it's the variety which really embeds the new movement patterns, the new learning, if you like. So try it lying down.
Yeah. So then Gabriele Pop says, do you teach courses in person in the US?
I don't. No, I don't. But there are people who do. And I think Suzanne, who commented just now, she teaches courses.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah. I imagine she was doing a Feldenkrais workshop. That's what she's describing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Georgina Frame says, Catherine, how about giving group lessons to us online?
Well. We are on May 9th, we begin a new program doing exactly that. It's a 6-week program where we do 2 sessions a week. One session is a discussion about some concepts. And are you doing a lesson in that as well?
I'll do a short lesson in the Q&A. Yeah.
Okay, so there will be a short lesson in there. And then the other session will be just the lesson.
Just the lesson, yeah.
Yeah. So this starts May 9th, and I have all the info for you if you want to check it out. I wasn't really going to focus on that too much today, but I can give you the info. And I also wanted to, before I move on to that, I wanted to invite anybody that wanted to continue to talk about today's session to go into our challenge group. And you can continue the discussion in there when we're done, or for those of you watching the replay, you can post your observations, your questions, and so on. So I'm going to post the link to that in just a quick second, and I can post the link to the program. It's called The Aware Rider, of course, Moving Towards Mastery. And it's a program with Catherine, but also with us. So we're all co-teaching together. So it becomes really a discussion around these concepts and how we can use them as writers to improve our awareness in our writing. And lovely, lovely concepts. So I am going to post these links for you. Let me find it.
Yeah, and Charlotte Zetterberg, who's another Feldenkrais practitioner, goes on to say about doing it in lying down for Kat. If you do it in lying down, you can let go of all the work your postural muscles are doing in sitting and standing. And it's another orientation, which is also valuable, which I think is very true. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So, Jane Amaku has a question. She said, would you explain what you mean by a muscle blockage?
I didn't say that. I think somebody else said muscle blockage.
No, somebody else did.
Yeah. But it may be, I don't want to interpret what somebody else has said, but it may be that they have an experience of movement getting stopped in a joint. And that can feel like a muscle blockage because it's a place where the muscles are working quite hard to keep a joint still or fixed. Yeah. So then you don't get the movement distributing evenly through your whole self or your whole body.
I mean, I use that term a lot, and for me, it just means a stiff, tight muscle that's contracted and not stretching all the way, you know, so that the range of motion is limited, and as a result, the joint that's associated with the muscle is limited in its range of motion. It stays in one setting, you know, more flexed or more extended or whatever, but you can't move with a full range of motion, right? So, and that usually it feels hard. If it's in the horse, you feel the hardness in that part of the body. You feel it through the aids. You feel it when you touch the muscle. It just, feels sometimes like there's a rock under the skin. And well, in humans, it will be the same, right? If somebody is really tight, has a very tight muscle, then you can feel that well. And it interferes with the freedom of motion. And then Linda Steinberg, she says, from the conversation here, would it be accurate to say that the goal of core engagement is to support proper alignment of the spine, so that once your body learns this feeling, you don't have to have as much engagement of the core muscles as to maintain stability?
I think it's probably it's a process, isn't it, of as you get a more refined use of yourself, you won't have to engage your core so much, because you will have better balance and a better ability to restore your balance. But, as Suzanne says, it's, to have a really great skeletal alignment, if you like, to feel that length, which is very stable. It is a very refined use of the very deep muscles, which are closer to the spine, actually. It's not about your belly muscles. I think that's the point. Of course, muscles have to work, but it's not about tightening your belly muscles, because when you tighten your belly muscles, you flex yourself. When you flex yourself, you come forward. Now, obviously, if someone's really, really arched in their back, then the tone of the muscles in their abdomen might change a bit in order to, to bring them to more length.
Yeah, you need all the muscles along the spine, front and back, up and down to create the stability. Otherwise, you would collapse in a pile, right?
Sure, absolutely.
So when I talk about core muscles, that's kind of what I mean. You use whatever muscles in the front or the back of the spine, left and right, to achieve that alignment. And in writing, my personal experience is that increasing the core, back muscles, abs, whatever part of the spinal muscles helps to relax the arms and legs and gives a better connection from through the seat to the bit. I think maybe it's sort of talking slightly at cross purposes, because I agree. It's just to get away from this tightening in the abdomen, the lower abdomen. That can block you too.
So yes, in order for your spine to stay upright, of course, your extensor muscles have to be active. Muscles have to be active, but it's a question of what comes first.
Yeah,
if you get a clear sense of all the vertebrae of your spine and how to feel more upright, then the core muscles will organize themselves to do that without you even thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. And my own experience as a writer and as a teacher is that when the spinal muscles are not engaged enough, the hips tend to lock, and then often the shoulders tip forward and stuff. So it's like the hip joints lock up and you lose the freedom of motion. So you can't sit the trot anymore. You can't follow the motion of the horse's back. And then when you give your spine more stability, and engage those muscles a little more, you can let go with your hips. So that was a big thing for me in my own writing. It was a big hurdle that I had to overcome, because my hips used to also, be tight.
And I think, Thomas, how you've described how you were, in the Feldenkrais terms, we might describe that your pattern was one of being more towards flexion.
Probably.
And so therefore, how you would bring yourself up out of that would be to find your back more.
Right. Yeah.
For some other people, they might have to do something different.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Depending on conformation height and so on. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody with a hollow back, with an arched back, will have to do different things than I do. It's true. I naturally tend to slouch, and flex more. So that's why for me, discovering the back muscles was a big thing.
Yeah.
And by the same token, for somebody who's severely, hollow back, for them, the abdominal muscles might be the big thing.
Or they might, or to just find a way to relax all of that a little bit more instead of staying so hyper rigid.
I think, on that, if you are really hollow back, in my experience, what helps people to change that sense of themselves is to move in and out of it.
Right.
It's actually about, because, it's not about going from here to there. It's about how you make the transition.
Yes.
That's what's the important bit.
Right.
You know, it's not go, oh, I'm now going to engage my abdominal muscles,
Right.
because you're probably still engaging your back muscles, and then you're adding the abdominal muscles on top, and you end up with this co-contraction.
Right.
So actually understanding what does it feel like in my lumbar spine when I get a little bit more round, when my lower back goes more towards the floor, what does it feel like? And then generally you'll start to get a clearer sense of that.
Yeah.
But I don't think grabbing on with your stomach muscles and trying to hold yourself there is going to be helpful, because you need to be able to be movable.
Exactly. Anything rigid and static is usually a dead end. That usually doesn't work at all. That actually makes you much less stable and much less able to follow. That's why, you know, when you tell somebody to sit still, then it gets significantly worse, right? You know, keep your hands still, keep your legs still, or whatever. You know, don't bounce in the saddle. That's like the worst thing you can tell somebody, because it just makes it worse, and they get all rigid. Exactly. So instead, they have to move their joints more. You know, every joint has to move a little bit to absorb that movement. And it's not a rigid engagement. It's really this finding stability.
And that's a good lead into what we're going to talk about on Thursday. Actually,
yes, it is. Yeah.
Dynamic seat, which is exactly all of this.
Right.
How the seat really has to become very dynamic and has to work very efficiently.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to look at the seat from a different, in a very different way. I hope. I hope it'll be different. And interesting and intriguing.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I hope.
Actually, on you know, sort of a tangent of that you know, abdominal strength. I remember I had a student in the past who could do, I don't know, 150.
Yeah.
But she had a weak seat, right? In equestrian terms, a weak seat, not well connected.
Yeah.
And then she said, "But I do 150 sit-ups." So it's not the sheer muscle strength. It's how and when you use and engage. I mean, in what combination, in what muscle pattern, you know, you engage the muscles. And we had another student who always looked stiff on the horse, but when you let her do yoga exercises, she was super flexible.
Yeah.
So that was puzzling too. So I remember that in one of the groups you were saying to somebody that just developing flexibility on its own may not be the answer.
Yeah. It's organization. It's how your brain organizes movement.
Yeah.
And how does that action that your brain organizes, how efficient, effective, graceful, easy it is for whatever you're doing. Yeah.
Right.
And you know, core strengthening exercises, quite frankly, don't address that.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, quite often you end up, you know, unless you do it with a really refined use, you end up actually strengthening your patterns, your unhelpful patterns.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting.
But we are going to go into that a little bit on Thursday. So
yes, so
I hope you all get a kind of a really a sense of it, because it's all about the sensory experience. We can sit and talk, but it's when you feel it in your body that it really starts to make sense.
yeah, just like today, it really educates your awareness. Now, you know, we all have another layer of how we think about our fingertips touching, right? Yeah.
Oh, circles.
Oh, no.
It's hard.
We should probably wrap it up. For those of you who questions we didn't get to, please post them in the challenge group. Catherine and
Tag me. Yeah.
Thomas and I, you can tag us in there, and we will be watching in there for the discussions. And if we miss something, just tag us again. Because it can happen sometimes. And we will be meeting again on Thursday, 1 hour earlier, to talk about the dynamic seat. So please join us. I posted the link to the challenge group and also the link to the 6-week program. Go check it out if that appeals to you, if that resonates.
Yeah.
So thank you, Catherine. And
thank you. Thanks for having me. It's really enjoyable. Really good fun.
For us too.
Yeah,
and I can't wait to see how this continues on Thursday.
Great to see you then.
Yes.
Yeah, see you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Have a good
Thank you.
a good day, a good evening.
Yes, wherever you are. Exactly.
Wherever you are. Bye.
Bye-bye.